good. We are started. All right, cool. So we are live. We're just going to wait a few moments here for people to get settled in. All right. There we go. Looks like we're live now. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for another SEO from home. My name is Ben Jacobson. I am the digital marketing strategist as well as a host of SEO from home. And we're back with another episode of SEO from home. Today, we are actually going to be sitting down with one of our good friends, Yosef here, and we're going to be talking about email marketing as well as content promotion. And yeah, we're looking really forward to it. We are going to be opening up today's session for kind of more of an AMA. So we do encourage you guys to ask questions. And you can do so by clicking on that Q&A box down at the bottom there. So for those of you guys who are joining us for the first time, welcome. SEO from home is kind of our attempt to keep the the SEO community connected while we're kind of in this different work from home environment. What we're doing is we're talking with a variety of different industry leading experts inside of SEO, and we're talking about a bunch of different topics. We're talking SEO, we're doing PPC on Thursday. We're talking about PPC in Spanish, actually. So that one's like a huge divergent from what we normally are discussing. So we're trying to kind of blend those and branch out a little bit more, and then also bring it back home to some of the more key things like we're talking about today, which is going to be content promotion. That's something that we talk about quite a bit. So we're super excited to go in and be talking about that. We have a few questions up here today. But again, as I mentioned, if you guys have like email marketing built into your part or any part of your strategy, like we want to kind of discuss that with you and also kind of beat up some of those strategies and see where maybe we can make some marginal improvements as well. Before we get started, I did want to mention that we did also release our ebook that is out actually now available for free. That discusses link building from start to finish. So everything from planning and concepting, keyword research, all the way through the full implementation. We have put together an awesome ebook. It's for free. I'm going to post it in the chat real quick for you guys if you are interested in that. Go ahead and click that link. And then let's see here. Chat box go. All right. I shrank my screen down and there. Okay, there we go. All right. It's in the chat for you guys there. And all of that being said, we are going to get jumped right into it here today. Again, like I mentioned, our guest today is the owner of Fusion Inbound Marketing, Yosef. And we're going to be talking about email marketing and content promotion. So without any further ado, tell us a little bit more about yourself and what we're going to be talking about today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Ben. It's a pleasure to be here. I love the SEO Home series. I think this year, especially, it's a great way to get online and keep that community going from home. So I'm very excited to be here. My name is Yosef. I own an agency in Kansas City called Fusion Inbound. And we are a full-service digital agency, but we really work to try and make sure that our clients include email in all of their campaigns. We found that email really does have a great return on revenue, and it's easier than most people think to get started. So I've spoken about email at a number of events, including Digital Summit, and I'm excited to answer everyone's questions today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, if that works for everybody.
Perfect.
Okay, you should be seeing my screen now.
Sir, we're good.
So what I found overall is that email is often seen as like this long haul trek. A lot of people think that it's difficult and there's compliance issues and list building issues. But really, it's really not that difficult once you dive in and understand how to make it part of your content distribution process. So what we tend to see is often people will invest a lot of time and money and energy in their content creation, and they'll do the keyword research and they'll write their long form content, they'll create their ebooks, and then they'll hit publish and everyone wants to like celebrate and go and buy drinks and treat the team to a round. But really that is when the hard work begins. Hitting publish is not completion. It's really, really just the beginning. And I think people understand this when it comes to social. but email is a bit of a gap. Email is accessible to everybody. Whereas we've seen Facebook's algorithms change and Twitter's algorithms change, and they've shifted more to a pay-to-play. Other than the introduction of tabs a couple of years ago, email really hasn't changed a bunch over the years. Most people check their email on their phones, at their computers throughout the day. And it's a really, really easy way to reach hundreds of people. And yet there's still this fear. There's still this fear of like, oh, is it spam? Is it compliant? Does anyone really read it? Well, really, people read it. And if you're writing emails, typically for our clients, we'll see 30 to 45% open rates on our email campaigns. We'll see very healthy click-through rates. And if you're in the e-commerce space, it can drive a ton of revenue. But your emails have to be interesting to get results like that. You can't just send spam or spam people. Another way that email really becomes quite effective is if you're a small company or smaller campaign and you're really watching your budgets, often you're competing in some spaces with a big company that might have money to burn on that campaign. So email gives you a really cost-effective edge to reach a lot of people. When you create a piece of content and it stands alone, that's great. You've created this sort of standalone wonder. But when you look at your content alone, it's just going to get lost online, essentially. The reason the email, a lot of these stats that I've got up on the screen now, I don't want to read through all of them, but we've seen over and over again, people want email campaigns as part of their business. They're effective. You get 6 times more clicks than you would from a tweet. It's overall being proven to be very, very effective. And the reason we encourage all of our clients towards email is because the same way there's a very much a mindset that SEO shouldn't exist in a silo. You need to talk to your SEO team and your PPC team. I think it's very much the same that your content, your SEO, your email, your social, your PPC, it can work in harmony together. So instead of having this standalone piece of content, you really build a forest from your content efforts when you are including email as well. It's also really measurable. For some of our clients, they're just happy that email goes out on time. Like, oh, Tuesday's our email day. That's great. So from a business point of view, clients are very happy when you stay on schedule and deliver the email. But everything's very, very trackable. You can see what people are clicking with. It's so easy to test. And ultimately, you can tie the dollars back to email very, very easily. When you're thinking about email campaigns and how to create content from email, these are some of the recommendations that we provide internally with our team. This is a slide I've shared at other events too, but you want to make your content stand out. Email is really, it's not about creating new content for email, but how can you leverage your existing content efforts, your existing social media efforts, and drive more people to it. So you want to keep it simple. A lot of these guidelines apply for your content creation overall, not just for your email campaigns. I like to keep it simple. I like to answer questions. I like to provide value in everything we do. I think providing an estimated read time at the start, we see this as a very effective tactic in blog posts. A lot of what we do from email is we are applying methods that work across other channels, and we're applying it to our email campaigns too. If you have a long form piece of content, think about the ways you would cut that up for social and apply that to email campaigns. Use maybe teasers, or you could even use email to drive people to your most effective social content. That's something we do for our clients. If they have some social content that's getting a lot of engagement, we will leverage email as well to drive more people there. And use unique images. Like, don't be scared to seek images. One of my favorite tools for creating effective images in your emails. One, I use TinEye very often. TinEye is essentially a reverse image search engine. So you can see how many people or how often that image has been used in other campaigns. One of the reasons that stuck out for me, I was on the London Underground once, and there was an ad for a dentist clinic, and they had just used the same images that we had used for a dental clinic. And I was like, that's not cool. Like, I mean, it was funny to see the same images, but by using TinEye, you reduce the likelihood of that happen. Because as marketers, we can get fatigued by images, but consumers too. They might even confuse the brands if they don't realize what they're looking at. Pexels and Unsplash, I think, are pretty popular resources for free images too. This slide is really more relevant to how we approach all of our content creation, but getting client buy-in is key. And then we build our content using keyword research, we invest in the content, we make it stand out, and then content distribution is really why email is so front and center for every campaign we do. So at this point, I've covered some of the high level overviews of why we do email and how we approach it. I'd love to open it up for some questions from everybody and see what problems and pain points you're having with your email that maybe we can dive into and solve.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, definitely. If you guys have questions, or if you have tell us what you're doing in your strategy that you find to be effective, or maybe areas that you're maybe getting stuck even. I had a couple questions even that I just came up with as we were kind of listening to that. I actually, interestingly enough, previously to where I'm at Page One Power, I was with an organization, and I actually was leading their email marketing campaigns. I mean, it was a small team, so I mean, it was something that I was entirely in charge of. And when I went into it, I was extremely surprised at how viable it still was. I think I was stuck in kind of that mindset of email is kind of a dead media. I was in that time, I was focused solely on advertising and paid advertising on social and things like that. Can you maybe, since you are so immersed in this space, maybe shed some light on why people so often kind of discount the effectiveness of, especially in e-commerce? I've seen huge results, but why do you think that it is that people are so often discounting that?
I think that it gets pushed aside because it's just simply not as sexy. I think people want the Instagram, so they want the latest trends. We've seen a rise of our clients even asking for TikTok recently, and we're like, yeah, let's cover our basics first before we go and do the new shiny thing. Let's go ahead and make sure we're covering our basics. I don't remember the stats offhand, but back in the day, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you put something on Facebook and 10, 20% of your followers would see it. Now that's down to fractions of a percent because it's become pay to play. So if you're just doing organic social without any paid, you're not going to see the results you used to, and you're going to pay for your ads. Now,
yeah, especially if it's not like a consistent, like I mean, especially if it's like a semi basis, like it's not a every single day, 3 times a day.
right, exactly.
It just crushes everything.
Right, 100%. And I mean, just think about your own behavior with email. Like for a lot of people, it's the first thing they check during the day. They'll check it if they're waiting for public transit or if they're even in the restroom. Like people check their emails. And you have tools like Boomerang. So if your email, maybe people can't act on it right away, but they can put it back and they can bring the attention back to themselves when they want it. We, as an agency, we use email for client communication, but not for any internal communication. Internal communication is all Slack and Asana. But so our email, my inbox is either things my clients need or it's things that I want to see. You have to opt in for email. You're not waiting on an algorithm to serve you what it thinks you want to read. I don't know if how many people on here have seen The Social Dilemma. I think a lot of people are talking about that right now. But just like users are opting in for emails they want to see, not algorithms.
Yeah, and I think also, I think the point has been brought up a few different times, but if you look at, let's look at social media specifically. If you think of the video space, like you look at something like Vine that was insanely popular and created, overnight influencers of people that previously didn't have like any necessarily like advertised talents. Like they're not out there necessarily as much as they were before. There's people that their entire career and booms and busted on a single app. And I mean, if you look at some of the people that survived through something like that, through an app shutdown, are the people that were able to diversify.
Right.
And the one thing that I also wanted to layer on top of that is not only are you diversifying, but like with email, to your point, it's something you're opting in for. It's something that you kind of covet. Like I feel like people are like, they don't want to get rid of their old email address because there's so much tied to it. Whereas I think social media, like people kind of wane on that pretty quickly when a new thing comes along.
Absolutely. I mean, we all talk about diversifying our assets or our income. If you're a brand or a business, your audience is an asset. So having it all on Twitter, well, Twitter's probably not going away overnight,
Mhm.
but we never know. These are privately owned companies. Vine shut down with not much notice. Um,
True.
so I, as well as doing this for clients, I used to have a food blog, and I had thousands of followers, tens of thousands of email addresses, but my goal was always to go after email accounts, email addresses, and those were the people that really engaged the most with me.
And it's also something to where you are, like your email is something where you, people are protective of it because they don't want to get spam, obviously. But think of how many times you've changed your phone number versus how many email addresses you've had. I've had a
Right.
lot of email addresses, but I can tell you one thing, that there's still one that I use on a regular basis for my Google Drive that I got when
Yeah.
Google first announced private accounts. Like
Right.
I've had it for, man, it's been over a decade. Like,
Right. You
um,
know how long people have been in the tech space or the marketing space if their name is their email address and they got in early.
yeah, exactly. And um, it's it's just interesting to see that it's so quickly tossed aside because I think so many people are worried about becoming spam, that
Right.
I think they're afraid of people actually, because honestly, like I understand that because I get email fatigue for sure. Like I get
Hmm.
so many emails on a regular basis, and 98% of them are automated like junk.
Yeah.
Like even if it's like things that I subscribe to, and like, but it's like notifications for Asana, and it's, all of these things that are important, yes, but it's like I'm not excited. It's like when you get like a real piece of mail in your mailbox, like you're like, oh,
Something
someone
on a bill.
actually like did something. And like if you can be effective with your email, like there is some truth to the fact that like people are interested in they're wanting to hear from you
Yeah. And
if
and I
you
think
provide value.
right, exactly. You have to provide value. I think there's two things that you just sort of just touched upon. One is people think it's spam. If anyone watching has or listening has an old list, you shouldn't just go and send out an email to a bunch of people who you haven't engaged with. There are steps you can take to clean that up and re-engage, and to do so in a way that's legal and effective. The number of times a week I get asked, like by clients, "Oh, are you going to buy a list?" I'm like, "No, that's useless." If you have a budget for buying a list, then that's when you do a targeted social campaign, for example.
Mhm.
Um, Actually, on that vein, your email list, if you have a healthy list, creating a segment of your most engaged subscribers is a great way to target people from an ad point of view and create a lookalike list from that.
Good point.
Um, and also, your email doesn't have to be. One of our largest clients is in real estate, and we don't email about their listings ever. We email about local events, new content. When we all went into lockdown back in March, we put together an article for this client of 151 things to do during lockdown. And it was the most effective email campaign we've ever sent for him. His phone was ringing off the hook. And it wasn't to sell houses, it was to connect with his audience, quite literally connect with them at a time of uncertainty. Um, and as people sort of freed up and started going out again or started moving house again, he's been busier than he has been last year.
Yeah, and I think that that's part of what people get scared of too, is they're not really entirely sure how to come across as authentic or as like, I think people get stuck in the mindset of advertising and marketing in general, to where it's like I have to be like selling something, I have to be selling something. And something that my eyes were open to just from being inside of the SEO space longer period is just how much of it is important to engage on the non-transactionary things. Like I, I
Yeah.
knew that before. Like, I mean, I think everyone knows that. Like in your heart, like that like you shouldn't just always be like trying to sell people. But I don't think it ever really truly resonated until I started understanding the value of like writing real content that actually people want to find and they want to engage with and they're looking for. and
100.
like meeting people where they are, and like if you can be that person where you're meeting them where they're at, where they're at that intersection of trying to figure out how to do XYZ, and
Hmm.
you're like, hey, I can show you how to do XYZ, and they're like, wow, awesome, thank you, like, can you help me with other stuff?
Yeah.
Like that sort of ability to where it's like you're just offering like the ability to help people in some sort of way.
Yeah.
And then like if you can establish that trust in that relationship, like they're more willing to engage with you in other ways if the first thing that you put forth is trustworthy and it's beneficial to them.
Absolutely.
I think that that can be applied across the spectrum for just about anything with marketing.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's different tactics, but like I think that should be a good core principle to keep in mind when you're putting together any campaign.
I agree completely, and I don't think anyone would say no one's going to take social and say, "Oh my god, all social is terrible." Yeah, there are some social campaigns that really do suck,
Yeah,
but that doesn't mean everything is terrible.
sure.
And I think email has this bad reputation for being spammy,
Mm-hmm.
or being spam. I've had clients be like, "Oh, are we just going to spam people?" Like, no, that's not what we're here for. That's not what we're doing. We'll send emails and they'll be effective and they'll open. And if they're not getting the good open rates or click through rates, well, that's when we revisit the strategy or we revisit the design. Um, there's one client we work with who was quite resistant. They do emails throughout the month, and then they do a monthly recap, like a newsletter. And they were adamant they wanted the monthly newsletters to be September update, October update, November update as the subject line. And I kept pushing back. And actually, this month we convinced them to do an A/B test, um, but have an effective subject line versus the month subject line. And now we have the data to say, hey, this is why we've been pushing on this. We need to do it differently. Um, and that's, I think the power of email is like the data can be there 24, 48, 36 hours after a campaign. You have some hard numbers. I mean, you can have it sooner as well, depending on your list size and what your goal is. But having the data, um, is one of the it's one of the things I love the most. I geek out on the data, and just changing the verbiage or the colors of your call to actions or the types of emails can have such a massive impact.
Yeah, that stuff is always so fascinating to see. Like when you can compare side by side,
Yeah.
and I mean, split testing inside of email is just a beast in and of itself. Like
Yeah.
you don't it's interesting because you can use social media and you can use audience builders and Facebook's audience tool to build out and kind of predict what is going to happen inside of your segment. But when it really comes down to it, like an email list is a very unique set of people that have taken like a very specific action, whereas social media is like you're blasting ads to new people that you don't fully understand like what they're interested in. You can do research obviously and you can make sure that you're taking your best guess, but the people that are inside of your audience is a very unique imprint. Um, One thing that I wrote down, I just wanted to mention real quick. You alluded to a couple times making sure that you're not like spamming or you're doing things legally. For anyone who may not know, if to to Yosef's point here, if you have like an old email list and you send that out through Mailchimp or SendGrid, something like that, um, there is actually a organization called the ICANN, and they actually I believe that's right,
Yeah.
but they actually monitor like email, and so if you are doing things and you're sending to like too high of a percentage of people that are not active anymore, or you get too many bounces or too many spam reports. So every time that you're in Gmail and you flag something as spam, like that actually does have a real effect.
Absolutely.
Um, and so like you should know like you need to go through and you need to make sure that your list is clean first. And there's there's a number of ways to do that. A lot of people recommend paying for a list cleaner. It's a service online, and they go through and they kind of filter out and find the dead emails. Um, I'd be very cautionary. I've seen a lot of nightmare stories from that, and people still get their accounts shut down. So just do your best to make sure that you're using as active of emails as you can, even if that's asking for a re-opt-in. from your list. That's one option that you can do, to where you can ask people to reconfirm that they want to be a part of your list too. So having things like that in place will make sure that your email account won't be completely suspended, which is super important if you're trying to build your company up.
100%. We've had clients who reach out as a result of they thought they could just reactivate, and their spam rates go through the roof. I think it's important there are some of those list cleaning services that are better than others. There are some that we will use for a campaign like that. But whenever we're doing a reactivation campaign, we generally do it from a different email service provider. And then we import all the users who have reactivated
That's a good idea.
into the main account. Not that we're trying to do anything black hat or shady, but just that extra level of protection. Prevent, like, if something does go wrong, if the spam rates are unexpectedly high, you don't want to end up messing with your entire ESP.
Exactly. And I mean, exactly. It's not necessarily, and I've had to do that before as well with, I mean, some providers are more stringent and strict than others.
Yep.
And you'll kind of find your levels if you have to research that. Unfortunately, you'll kind of find your levels of granularity there. But it's essentially you're trying to let people go. Honestly, don't look at it as like you're trying to game the system. Like, you're trying to let people leave your list so that you can not bug them. So
if someone doesn't want to hear from you anymore, quit emailing them. Like, I'd rather have, let's say you cull your list by 25%, you're going to see your open rates and your conversion rates go through the roof. Yep. And then you have a better way of identifying prospects to target, be that through social ads or be it just through better understanding of the content that resonates. But losing subscribers is not always a bad thing.
I mean, and you have to look at, there is such thing as positive churn inside of a list as well. To your point, you're kind of thinning the herd, you're trimming the fat. Like, if those people are not interested in hearing from you, then you want them out of your list, because in a lot of cases you're paying for seats on your email list. So if you have 10,000 people and you go to 10,001, that might bump you up another $200 a month, or depending on your service. So I mean, I know that's a dramatic example, but like, the truth is there. Like, the numbers are true. You want to have the most potent list as possible.
Yep.
Another question I was going to try to bring up, just for anyone that might be interested in trying to get back into pushing email marketing and like trying to help promote their content. What should they be doing? Let's say that you have an email list right now that maybe you send maybe once a month. You do like a November update, a December update. So that the list isn't necessarily dead, but it's definitely not thriving. What kind of changes do you think people would be able to make, and what kind of budget would you expect for a smaller business to be able to kind of get things up and going, so that maybe let's think of something like a local, we always use the example of like a local plumber. Like, what would someone like that be able to do to where they have content that they're getting produced regularly, but what can they do from an email standpoint that could kind of get their traffic and their conversions up?
Sure. That's a great question. I generally think once a month is not frequent enough for email. If your list is healthy and you're providing valuable content, then emailing weekly or every other week, I think, should be your minimum. I generally think that the same way you might have a content calendar for social and you might produce different content for different days of the week, you would have different content for your email. So I would divide, let's take the plumber example. Let's say we wanted to do 4 emails a month. I think one email campaign could be a monthly special. One could be a seasonal update to do with freezing pipes or what. I'm not a plumber, so this is where my keyword research would come in and my background information would come in. But you want to do seasonal updates. If the team is large enough, having team spotlights, people like to know who they're working with. We're actually onboarding a new HVAC company right now, and they have a great idea. in that before your technician arrives at your house, they're going to email you the name and photo of your tech as an added layer of security.
I actually
So
had them do that. I had my windshield replaced. Sorry to jump in front of you. I had my windshield replaced, and they texted me a picture of my technician
yeah,
ahead of time with like his ID and like all of his credentials and like how long he's been with the company. And like that was awesome because this person was in my car
right.
with my keys.
Yeah,
So
yep, exactly.
fantastic idea.
So email doesn't have to just be, I mean, we think about email as transactional emails and marketing emails. So you have transactional emails that would be your appointment has been scheduled or your receipt or things like that. But it doesn't have to be boring like that. You're probably going to, if you ever have a buddy that needs a new windshield, or if ever for some reason you need it again, you're probably gonna be like, oh yeah, this was a great experience. Like,
Great.
also, given the memory of Gmail, a friend of mine asked me just this weekend the name of the company I used when we shipped the dog. I shipped my dog over when I moved to the States. Like, what company did we use to get the dog here? I was like, oh, it's going to be in my Gmail somewhere. And I mean, it was. And I was able to dive back in. So I'm thinking of email to create those connections and experience and be memorable with your emails as well. And another thing to weave in, I wouldn't only think of email for a plumbing company as these sort of weekly marketing emails or bi-weekly. Post transaction, like, are you doing review solicitation? Are you doing that by email? Are you doing it by text? There's all sorts of ways to just connect with clients, and a lot of it would play into what are you doing for content creation too. If we have a very engaging social post, or if we're doing a social contest giveaway type thing, we'll email about that, and we'll email that to a segment if you're using a Mailchimp type platform. And every email service provider has their pros and cons and their nuances. But Mailchimp in particular can look at who is on which social platforms from your subscriber base.
That's cool.
So you can segment. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize that you could do that with Mailchimp.
Yeah, they have like social data that you can pull in. So you can look at, like, well, maybe you have a segment of people that are going to engage better on Twitter than on Facebook. We'll send them that content accordingly. So there's great ways to just. I like to refer to content creation a little bit as trying to be the Babel fish between the customer and the business. The Babel fish is a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy reference, so my British roots are coming out. But you put the Babel fish in your ear and it would translate whatever language someone's speaking to you and you can understand. So often companies' emails will be, we did this, or we got this award, or we did this press release, or we hired someone. Well, is that memorable? Is that interesting? And how can you shift that language? How can you translate it into something that people want to open?
Yeah, I think so often, I mean, and I'm guilty of this entirely myself, but like I get so in the weeds of like, okay, we need to make sure that we talk about this promotion and like this guest, and we got to talk about like this thing, and it's at this time. We got to make sure it's right time zone, and like you're so in the weeds of like what you're talking about
Yeah.
that you forget to even think, does anyone care? Like, does anyone actually want to read this?
Yeah.
Like, would I want to read this? Like, if you're looking through your email and you're like, if you are not enticed by your own email, like, is anyone else going to be? And it sounds like such a silly, like, short-sighted, like, oh, well, duh, Ben, like, of course. But at the same time, like, seriously, like, really think about it. Like, if you were not involved in this business, like, would you be interested in reading this?
Right.
And I think that's a serious question that people should ask.
One thing I like to do whenever we get a new hire, if someone is new to our team, I like them to look at some recent email campaigns. I just want their feedback. Do they understand what we're selling? Do we understand what the campaign's about? Is there any language in there that is very corporate-y or buzzwordy that doesn't make sense?
Good idea.
I used to work at a very, very large corporate organization, and I used to sort of ask the question, like, would someone's grandmother understand this campaign? Like, is it easy enough or interesting enough that, like, someone who is not tech savvy would get this? And that's no offense to all the tech savvy grandmothers, but
Now.
there you go. And the other thing is I think there's a good understanding of how powerful a headline can be in an article or a blog post, a social post, and people are testing A/B testing social posts on Reddit or on Facebook, I think too many people neglect to give that level of importance to their subject line. I think it's a really important fact. I mean, it can make or break your open rates. Like if you have a boring subject line, is it going to get attention? The from name, are you sending it from Ben or are you sending it from the company name? And these are things that can make a massive difference to your open rate and your conversions.
So what would be, I mean, I know this is like one size fits all, I'm sure, works for subject line, but what would you kind of maybe, if there was a question that you could propose to whoever is composing that email, like, is your subject line X, or something that you could do to like make that subject line have teeth? Is there like a question you can ask yourself, like, would I like the reason I keep saying that is I keep thinking of, do I want to read this? Is there something that you can think of that would kind of help give that subject line more teeth and allow a higher click-through rate by being more enticing?
So yeah, I'm going to answer that with 3 points because I think that is number one, try and tease. And even if that means pushing the boundaries of and being a little bit edgy in the content, but try and tease, like open up the your thought process. We wrote a guide to swimming pools and lakes in Kansas City. This was last summer, pre-COVID, and at the start of the summer, we wrote this guide to swimming pools and lakes. But we called it the client's name is Blake. We called it Blake's Guide to Getting Wet in Kansas City, and it piqued people's curiosity. People saw that in their subject, like in the inbox, and it wasn't like, oh, here's lots of pools that you can visit. It was like, what is he talking about? Where can we go?
Yeah.
So think about your content creatively. Another thing, there's a website called 5 Second Test, and you can write 2-3 headlines, subject lines, and you can pay, I think it's a couple of pennies, but you can pay for people to just choose the one that resonates better. It might not be called 5 Second Test anymore. It could be what it used to be called, and they've now got like a startup name with no vowels, but that's what they used to be called.
A string of consonants
There you go.
and an at sign somewhere three-quarters of
Exactly.
the way through.
But 5 Second Test is a tool we use to just A/B test stuff before we send it. And then finally, probably a good 10 years ago, I attended a webinar with, it was actually Mars and Upworthy did a content writing webinar. And one thing that stuck with me was, and people can Google this if they want to find out more, but Upworthy's approach to writing headlines. And for each piece of content that they would publish, and this was back in the day where BuzzFeed and Upworthy were like defining going viral, and everything was clickbaity and viral and do you know and oh my gosh type of headlines. But they would write 25 headlines for every article they published. And they would say the best performing headlines, the first third would be a bit silly. They'd kind of get burnt out in the second third. And then the third third, they would always find their winning headlines. So I really like it when my team spend time writing 25 headlines or subject lines for an email. And it sounds ridiculous. It sounds like, are you kidding me? Subject lines the last thing you're going to put together. But if you're talking about the difference between a 15-18% open rate, I mean, I'm personally a little disappointed. If we get less than a 35% open rate, I'm disappointed in what I'm seeing. Like we get good open rates.
That's a great open rate.
Right.
I mean,
But that's from segmenting the audience, whittling it down, but also really investing as much time in your subject line as you would building the email.
well, I mean, if you think about it, like again, I did come from a background more of social advertising, and you start thinking about how much time are you spending on a caption? Like
Mm-hmm.
the subject line is your caption, and then
100%.
your preview text is like your, or I guess the sub caption or whatever, the
Yeah.
header in your sub caption or your header and caption. So I mean, like, how much time do you think you spend like writing out captions for like something that you're going to be spending? You know, maybe you're doing a $500 Facebook ad spend, maybe it's
Yeah.
5,000.
Yeah.
Like, how much time are you spending on that, and how much importance are you placing on something like that?
Yeah.
That's the same thing, because you know, if you're spending, you know, $500, you might get in front of you know, let's say 10,000 people or 20,000 people. If you have a good email list, like, you might hit that 4, 5, 6, 8 times a month.
Right.
And so why would you not want to have really potent, really edgy, or not edgy, but like really just kind of juicy subject lines that are, helping get you in front of that full audience?
Right.
Because otherwise it's the same thing as, spending that 500 to 5K on a social budget and not doing any targeting,
Yeah.
or not doing any research ahead of time, or not using your custom built audience and just throwing it out there. Like
Right.
if you're not doing that research or putting in that effort for your emails, then it's the same thing as not completing the full task of doing your Google ads or your Facebook ads.
Right. One thing that I've heard people talking about in the SEO world is if you have a really effective click-through rate on your PPC, one of your ads is performing really well. Well, should that influence your title tags? Should you want to sort of apply those lessons to organic search?
Sure.
Similarly, if you have something that's very effective, it should be your subject line.
That's a great
So
point.
again, closing that loop, I had that slide about like everything working together, and those slides were kind of a short version of like an hour-long presentation. But really, like using that data, let's stop thinking about email as like an add-on in a silo, but let's make it part of. You wouldn't not write a meta description for a new page on a website. You wouldn't not optimize your image titles and tags.
Yeah.
Similarly, like you don't want to be like, and let's say you've got this really effective guide, you've launched your ebook, you know it performs well, you're getting great conversion on search. Maybe pull some of that data. Like be like, oh, 4,500 people have already downloaded this ebook. Well, that's interesting. I want to open that email. Don't just be like, oh, our new ebook is here. Great, good for you. You did something over the weekend. Not like, well, not to dismiss, but you if you want, like, use data, use stats, all of the lessons we have can be applied to email. And for some reason, email is forgotten as part of like really effective campaigns.
Yeah, and that actually dovetails perfectly with one of the things I wrote down when you were speaking earlier, is how is it that we integrate SEO, advertising or PPC, and an email into this kind of symbiotic relationship? And I think I think you really kind of hit on a great segue into how to get started in that. Taking the data that you are already deriving from whatever source. If you already have great organic information and you have awesome organic traffic, awesome. But find those keywords that are performing well for you. Find the content that's performing well. Use some of that data in order to influence what content you're writing for your email. And vice versa. If you don't quite have that organic traffic yet and you're looking to build that, it might be time to shell up a few bucks and see what kind of information you can get out of doing some paid ads to see where your audience is at and where you can find that intersection of what you're providing and what they're looking for. And that can, again, to your point, I think you mentioned this earlier, is that should also help influence your content strategy. Like all of those things should be kind of like a working together to kind of create one wheel or one vehicle all heading in the same direction.
100%. When it comes to content, I like to build long form content for our clients. Guides, glossaries, very informational based, answering questions. But what we can see, obviously we measure that with our traditional SEO metrics and our rankings and our traffic and our conversions. But what we can also learn from that is which is the most effective email content. And it varies by client. One of our clients, we get great engagement by email. We get great open rates, but his audience, his customers, text him. So we've changed our call to actions to be, we don't try and get people to reply because we've learned that they just won't, but we make sure they text. And we've tried click to text type of things. But you learn from each campaign and each client, like what's going to work. And it's going to be different in different cases.
How do you feel about marketing through like text messaging, like SMS marketing, or I do see more people are beginning to do that.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? I mean, you said that you had some experience in that. Have you delved very much into it, or?
We've got a couple clients that have asked us to do it, and we have usually for event signups in very relationship based businesses.
Mhm.
Um, I struggle with it because you see stats like, oh, SMS has 95% open rates. Great, it's a text, it's a notification. Like, yeah, you pick up your phone. I don't know how many. I mean, my phone's been buzzing throughout this, and I don't know if it's app notifications or texts. Um, I think, and I'm speaking with personal experience, I almost have notification fatigue. I don't really go through. Um, I get notifications on WhatsApp and I get notifications on text and nothing else
Mhm.
because it's too much. So I think part of that fatigue could be seasonal. Like I think in the run up to the elections, I've had so many
Mhm.
political related texts that I've started unsubscribing from them all, whether I'm supporting or not supporting that
Yeah. Oh man,
course.
it's every day,
Um,
all day long.
right. So I think texting might become the new spam campaign if it's done wrong. But
Yeah.
what we do see is those open rates are effective, but there has to be a call to action. We had a client do an event and they did a text invitation, but as an FYI, they didn't want to include a calendar link. They didn't want to include an RSVP. It was just like, hey, we're doing this thing. And because there was no clear cut call to action, it was just a notification. Whereas in other campaigns, we said, hey, this event is happening or this thing is happening. Um, this is how, like, the outreach was text, but there was a clear call to action.
Mhm.
So I think I don't know that I've done enough text messaging to really speak to it effectively. One campaign we're looking at putting together right now. We have a client who, before Thanksgiving every year, gives away his clients can choose an apple pie or a pumpkin pie. And every year we've done that through email. It's really easy to track. All the client has to do is click and it records what pie they want. So we're debating doing that by text this year. But it's really effective by email. And ultimately, our devices aren't single channel anymore, you know? But if think back 15 years. I mean, I watched Honey, I Shrunk the Kids with my children. And their response was like, why is the phone attached to the wall with a wire? Like they were like, what is that thing on the wall? But now, like everything, like this isn't a phone. It's my email, it's my text, it's games, it's WhatsApp, it's internet. I've sent faxes from my cell phone if I needed to. So I think you need to know your audience because ultimately, most of their channels are coming through to the same device.
True. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, I guess it's really where I'm always left feeling whenever I think about SMS messaging as a marketing tactic. I'm always thinking of when I receive messages that are from a business that aren't hyper relevant to what I'm wanting in that moment. Like
Right.
for me, like I have a guilty pleasure of ordering. I don't know what it is, but for the last year, we have these cookie shops that have opened up all around Boise that are like just these giant, massive cookies. And every single time it's, it's awesome. So we have a bad habit of like every once in a while, I tell my fiance if she says cookies 3 times, like she has to get, so because of that, when I order them, I get a text message on my phone that's like, "Hey, we got your order. You're good to go." So I don't have to worry about like, "Oh, did it go through? Like, is it working?"
Yeah.
Like, because you order it from your phone, and then it'll be like, "Hey, we're on our way to your house with your cookies," and it's like,
Yep.
"Sweet." Like, and then it's like, "Hey, we just arrived. We're at your door," whatever it is. And then afterwards, it's like a text message. It's like, "Hey, how did you like them?" Like
Yeah.
15, 20 minutes later, it's like, did they arrive hot and like,
Yeah.
were they good? And it's like, that is really effective to me
Yep.
because it's what I want in that moment. I think the same thing could be accomplished if they had their own app, but these
Yep.
are very small little, small bakeries. So because of that, I don't see like if I did like a Nordstrom thing and I got a notification from Nordstrom that's like, "Hey, we have sales on shirts." I'd be like, "I don't care."
Right.
Like,
I
did you have
think
to invade my inbox or my text messages for that? Like, it seems invasive.
I think one of the rules of social media that I like to apply is speak to your audience where they're at. So if you know that you have a ton of people on Facebook, well, then don't do a LinkedIn campaign.
Yeah.
If you know that you have a great audience on Twitter, that's where you need to be. So as you were speaking through that and the cookies, there's a brand of mask I've come to really like this year. It's called Strata. Their masks are like $1 a piece. I buy them 10 at a time, and I get text note. It's a Shopify website, and I get a text notification about my delivery updates. And those are like, oh, okay, whatever. On the flip side, I'm doing a lot more app-based shopping and like Target delivery, or Instacart, and those texts I like. So I almost feel like you kind of need to know where your audience is and how they ordered. I almost feel like if someone ordered on their mobile device and paid with Apple Pay, maybe they're going to convert better to a text than if they were someone who like ordered online, did everything on a desktop, and then you start texting them. I wonder if there's any data around that.
Yeah, that's actually a great question, because if you think about like we've also been, I think like a lot of people, we've been doing a lot more like gardening and stuff. And so like there's like gardening nutrients that I got where I'm like, oh man, I'm really looking forward to this because I really need it. And like I'm anticipating that even though it's a $7 purchase.
Yeah.
Whereas like I might have something where it's like we have to get a new air purifier and that's $200 or whatever. And it's like I guess I'm excited for that, but like more excited for like the thing that I'm actually looking forward to.
The
So
fun
I
thing.
would be more interested in getting text notifications about this tiny little bottle of nutrient rather than like this, sizable, valuable, very important thing as well. So it's weird because there's a lot of like kind of individuality behind that.
Right.
So I almost wonder if you could like give the option of what if it's
Of
text
how.
message, email, or notification.
Yeah. I personally do not check email on my phone evenings or weekends. Like I made a rule for myself. I set that boundary for myself. Email is something I do on my computer. So a delivery notification for something that I'm eagerly, maybe it's a time sensitivity. Like I did a Target order because I don't want to take the kids to the grocery store type thing. Whereas I don't know. I feel like 80% of my e-commerce spend is with Amazon. And like there's a system and I get the notifications and like there's usually an Amazon box showing up.
I think maybe, and I've been kind of sitting on this for a little bit. I feel like maybe SMS marketing and SMS updates. I think that is a really cost-effective option for people who are running small businesses that don't have, 50 grand to fork over to have an app developed for them.
Yeah.
I think it's a great opportunity for people to have an additional layer of connectivity to their audience without being relocated to the spam filter in their inbox. I think it gives them a great opportunity if you can use it properly. And I think it's the same thing with email. I think it all ties back together with the same thing that we're kind of open with is, where is it that you are providing value in your email campaign?
Yep.
Focus on that. Cut out the things that like look at the numbers too. I mean, to your point, you said you really enjoy looking through the data and the dashboards. That's a great thing to do. Like that's your friend. Like that is your guiding, that's your lighthouse. Because if you are getting low click-through rates, if you're getting lower opens, if you're getting higher unsubscribes, if you're getting spam reports, like yes, those things are not all inherently bad or good on their own, but what it does is it helps kind of weave together an overarching story of where your audience is heading and what types of things that they're interested in consuming.
And I do think if anyone is new to email or new to SMS marketing, the barrier to entry for both of those platforms has never been lower. And some of the features that used to be very expensive. The first time I got involved with an automation campaign, the software cost was in the thousands. And now you can sign up for your Mailchimp account for less than $50 a month and be sending the same level of automation.
Yeah, there are I think even there's some options that have like a free, like up to like 100 contacts in your
Yeah.
list.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of options out there,
Yeah.
and I mean, I think I was talking about it a little bit earlier, but the budget for getting involved with email marketing is very low. It's
Yeah.
very low when you look at the cost per interaction with the actual people that have chosen to engage with you. That's a it's a very great value. Um, One last thing I wanted to kind of touch on that maybe we can close out on. Looks like we're getting just about to the top of the hour. Um, for those who are maybe hearing all of this and they're like, heck yeah, I want to get involved. Like, how can I build a more powerful email list? What can I do? And how can I start heading down the right path towards building my email list to where it becomes a viable sales channel for your business? What sorts of strategies would you maybe suggest considering for someone that's looking to really build that list up?
First of all, I would say look at what you are doing to capture current email addresses. You don't want to start off by sending an email out to people that haven't been heard from you for 2 years. So consider how you can build your list or how you can re-opt in your list. And then start thinking about email as part of your social calendar. Just add it as a channel. Think about it that way. I'm more than happy to answer any questions on Twitter. If someone has a thought after this, or if their question didn't get answered, I'm happy to just shoot me a tweet at ysilver. I'm happy to brainstorm. I've had people as well send me subject lines and say, hey, what do you think is going to perform better? I love stuff like that. But I think as a getting started, think about how you can build your list and how can email naturally fit into your campaign. If you're writing content already, if you're doing social already, if you're already promoting things elsewhere, um, instead of thinking about it as this like big bad new scary thing, how can you integrate it easily?
What about on the topic of maybe list building specifically? So if you are, let's say that you are a newer business and you only have maybe 100 subscribers, and those are just people that have purchased from you before. Um, is there a way to maybe accelerate your list growth so that you can start getting to market to new people that maybe haven't purchased from you before? So like an example that kind of comes to mind is, of course, like a website pop up. So subscribe to our newsletter. Can you maybe suggest maybe a few other maybe outside of the box things that you've seen as far as email capture, list building, to kind of get that channel built up over time?
Sure. I think it depends on the niche a little bit. If you are a larger business, I'm not a fan of pop-ups. They kind of interrupt. No one likes a pop-up. When you come to a website to read something, it's your search result. I think it's interruptive, and that's not a good thing. But weaving calls to action into the content, or having teasers, having guides, ebooks to download the content, and it sounds kind of old school, but it's effective.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for us, if you're a smaller business, maybe you're a local plumber who has a great relationship, um, asking people. The real estate client I mentioned, he's built his list. He literally texts people and he's like, hey, can we add you to our emails? This is the sort of thing we send. And it's just, I mean, it's the one-to-one outreach and just
Yeah.
putting it out there. And then integrating it into what you do already. I think review solicitation has become acceptable and people are almost expecting to get a review solicitation email at this point. But ask in that email, would you like to opt in? Or if you do a follow-up thank you, we have clients that will manually thank people for their reviews. Like they'll just send out another email thanking them, but ask them if they want to opt in at that point. Also, don't be ashamed to do it on social. We've done things on social where we've said, we're pre-releasing promotions, specials, unique products. It's being pre-released to our email list only. So you get your social followers to convert over as well.
Gotcha. So offering exclusivity,
Yeah.
downloads, guides, that sort of thing. So maybe even like so, uh, not necessarily gating content, but putting it
Team.
behind like a wall of low stature which is signing up for like an email newsletter. You think that
Yeah.
would be like a good example?
Yeah. And I think just making sure make it sound exclusive. We've done some testing with unique discount for the first 100 people that sign up. Or maybe another thing we found, you don't want to have your incentive drive poor subscribers. So you don't want to just be like, oh, free giveaway, give us your email address. Like again, it's not the right audience. But we've had clients who will partner with a local food bank or animal shelter, and they'll donate $5 for every email address that signs up for a limited time. And part of that is knowing what is your cost per acquisition for an email address? Like, what is that worth to you? Which, again, you dive into the data. If you know your conversion rates, and if you know your average revenue per email campaign, getting to your cost per acquisition for an email address is pretty easy. And then you can be like, well, would we want to spend this on ads, or do we have a really healthy organic social presence, and we can do this and make a donation?
Yeah, and there's also something too that I think if you are, for some reason, if you're able to connect with them and get them to want to engage with you on that level instead of just displaying an ad to a random person that isn't necessarily already engaged with even your social media brand, it seems like those are stickier emails for some reason. It seems like they churn less often, and they tend to be like the one-to-one example that you mentioned earlier. I imagine that because that real estate agent is like literally messaging people like, hey, Carrie, like,
Yeah.
I appreciate you talking with you the other day. Like, do you mind if I send you emails when I do some updates? Like, that person's probably less likely to unsubscribe than if it was just like a random, like, oh, I wanted to see what listings are in my area and I had to sign up. Like, if you're
100%.
shoehorning people into it, and there's not at least some volition of their own, then I feel like they're not going to be quite as sticky.
100%.
Awesome. Well, I think that just about wraps it up. It looks like we actually just went a few minutes over 1 o'clock here. I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk with me and answer a few questions and talk shop about email marketing.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this too. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
And I mean it. If anyone has any questions, reach out on Twitter.
Yeah,
Always
likewise.
happy to have a chat.
And if you guys have any other questions, definitely reach out to Yosef or at Page One Power. We're also going to be putting the recording of this up. So if you guys missed any part of it, we had to step away at any time, we're going to go ahead and have that up by the end of the week. We look forward to you guys joining us later this week. We're actually going to be sitting down with Francine Rodriguez, and we're going to be talking about Spanish PPC. It's a huge segment of the audience. It's growing, especially here in the States, that might be a really good business opportunity and potential for you guys to reach the audience that you're looking for, to be able to kind of help fulfill some of those needs and some of the things that they're looking for and searching for as well. So we hope you guys join us Thursday. Again, Yosef, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for joining in. We will see you guys next time. Have a good one. Stay safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.